here we are at the beginning of a project, and as you can see is I've bought some lumber and I've assembled some things together for project. And what I need to, I didn't get rough cut lumber, which would have been a little bit cheaper, saved $100 or so. I got dimensional lumber. Why? Because I really don't want to cut the ends. They're all going to be within 1/4 of an inch in length. So if I'm going to build an 8x16, I don't want to have to be taking a lot of time to cut things to length. So you'll see a little bit about what I'm doing. I got some plans here. I'm going to go by these plans and let's see what happens. The first thing to do is to lay out the 4x6s, which I laid them out and I put them side by side. So I made my marks. I used my speed square to make sure my lines are all correct, and then I need to put them down on existing marks that I had made on the concrete. I put those ends there and line the other ends up. I'm going to have a perfectly square beginning, which is what I needed. So measured it off, perfect. Let's get started. The next thing to do was to get ready to mark my floor joists, which are going to be every 16 inches on center. To make sure that they are correctly balanced, I put a mark of 16 1/4 inch from the end of each 2x4, so which will leave another 16 1/4 inch on the other side, and I just need to mark one side. So I mark them and get ready to lay them out. We had some sheds built a few years ago that there was no straps connecting the main rails with the floor joists, and when they were moved that really stressed them. So in building these we decided that we would use 4 straps to add integrity to the connection between the floor joists and the rails. After all of our floor joists are in, it is time for plywood. It's going to take 4 sheets of plywood. We use 3/4 inch plywood, and as I fasten it down, I use screws for the corners, and then I would finish it up with an air nailer. So this helps to make sure we keep our square, and it went pretty well. I only had to make 1 cut, and that was to offset the joints. We have the rails, we have the subfloor, we have the 3/4 inch plywood down with just 1 cut for so I could offset the plywood. So now we'll get ready to build the walls and go from there. The walls are going to go 24 inches on center. So when I go back to my blueprints, I'm starting at 7 foot, then every 2 foot, 7, 4, we add 4 inches, 7, 8, 8 foot, and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my studs for both sides of the wall. I will grab 2 8-footers to start with and cut them at 7 foot. I'll let one side for one side of the wall, and then put the others down for the other wall. I have a mark on this back wall, so I don't need to measure each piece. I can just cut it. Those I'll use later. And I'll mark this 7 foot. So increasing by 4 inches every 2 feet really works out easily. So when we put the 3 foot wide tin on, what happens is we just increase the slope 6 inches. So if I start my first piece of tin at 8.1 on one side, it goes to 8.7. And so the angle for my sidewall tin makes it very easy adding that 6 inches. So here I am nailing the sidewall together, and I was having a few issues with my nail gun, so I ended up having to get the screw gun and finish it with screws. A little bit slower, but the air nailer was having a few issues. And every 2 feet, I put a mark on the horizontal 2x4, which will be one of my side purlins, and so I could make sure that I got everything exactly plumb. little giant ladders. They're absolutely amazing. They're sturdy as a step ladder. They can be made straight for an extension ladder. And here I'm using it for my 2x6 rafter, screwing right to my 2x4 going straight up. One of the final things I needed to do before I put the steel roofing on is I put on what I called was hurricane straps, which I used my roofing nailer and just did 3 on each side just to make sure that it was, again, the rafters were securely attached. The tin that I had cut at 17 feet 1 inch, and the sides I overhung 2 inches. The siding was going to overhang 3/4 of an inch, so it'll be about 1.25 inches past the siding. And I gave it about 3 inches on the top and 3 inches on the bottom for a little bit of overhang there. Just again used regular roofing screws and lined it up, and it went really quickly and really well. There are a couple ways of cutting this ag panel roofing, and because this is right at the edge of a rib, I chose to use my utility knife to score it and then bend it, break it, walk on it, and I could snap it off. Then I was able to install it. It took me 3.5 hours from start to getting this under roof on a Saturday morning. Well, it's the next day now, and it's time to put some purlins on before I do the siding. And on the bottom, we put some 2x6s, and with 2x4x16s being 10 bucks, 11 bucks, I decided I'd take 2 minutes and just rip a 2x4x16 in half, and so I did that for the bottom. Again, I saved 10 bucks. It's really important to make sure that your corners are square before you put the steel on, because once you screw that steel on, it's going to be set. That's going to really hold the rigidity of the machine. So check those screws and check the square and make sure that I screwed some braces in to make sure it was square. Now it's time for steel. We're using this used steel, and we're doing what I'm calling an econo corner, where instead of running the steel to the edge and then putting an outside corner on, which those outside corners are costly, just cutting my steel and using a brake to bend that and just making it flow around the corner. So it seemed to work pretty good, and so I did that. I also used some on the back, a couple pieces, so that I could more efficiently use the steel that I had taken off the roof. I could have planned a little better for these two econo corners by just having a foot and then breaking it. It would have balanced out better. Instead, I had a very small bend here, which I was able to do it, but with an 8-foot shed, it would have been better to just bend each side 1 foot. But nevertheless, I got that and screwed it up, and the econo corner seems to be okay. And I think once we get this siding washed and cleaned up, it'll look fine. The last two econo corners around the doorways, I not only bend the long piece, but I also cut in and I bent it in the doorway, so there would be a little flap that would actually bend in and wouldn't have a weather problem there. So this was a little trickier to do, but it seemed to work out pretty good. finishing the steel in the front, we just had a small piece, and after that small piece decided to go back the side, and on the other side we didn't use any half pieces, we just used the full pieces, and if that side is showing, that'd be great. The sides really won't be much of an issue for us because these are going to be really close together, and so the seam on there, number one, it's waterproof. That you can see near the blue ladder there's a seam there on the side, but it overlaps and it shouldn't be an issue. We tried to line up the holes for the existing holes in the steel. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. Otherwise we will just put a little caulk in there and seal them up. Should be good. It's raining a little bit more, got to raining harder, and so I decided why not use my roof and go ahead and cut my steel underneath the roof. So I began to do that. Sometimes I learn slowly. Messy kind of corner. It turned out pretty good again. And once I got this installed, I had only a 9-inch piece yet to include. You can see I wrapped around the doorway there so that the 2x4 would be covered. And luckily, the 9-inch piece, just one seam, worked for finishing that top piece. I also took a piece of scrap and folded it over the entrance so that it would cover the plywood and the door would come down and cover that, so any splashing that would get in would be covered. These roll-up doors are really a cinch to install. However, it's really best to have two people to do that. You just put it together. Of course, these we took down from another unit, and then you just put 5 legs on each side, and they work really well. They're really nice, much better than a barn door like some storage units had. We really like these. So some of you, I'm sure, are wondering how much did this cost? Well, I had about $550 into all of the dimensional lumber that we bought. If we would have bought the steel new, it would have been $581. Of course, we had some used steel, fasteners approximately $40. So all in all, we had a little less than $1,200 into this shed. New, they are retailing like this for between 4 and 5 grand. It's been a fun project, and so I hope that you had as much fun as we did. We continually built some more, and the more we built, the better we got and more efficient we got, and I could do one by myself, only having help to hang the door for a couple minutes in 8 hours. Of course, you would have to add about $450 for a 6 foot wide by 7 foot 4 high door, which we already had.